Welcome back. You're watching Your World at 10. Now, as we've been telling you, Bharti and MTN have extended their exclusive deal talks by another month to the 30th of September. Though grey areas still remain, as sources tell us, over the conversion of GDRs and subsequent voting rights. To discuss the progress of this mega deal, we're now joined by Mohit Saraf of Luthra & Luthra and Romal Shetty, Executive Director at KPMG. Mohit, Romal, thank you very much for joining us on Your World at 10. Mohit, as we've been discussing over the course of the last few months, this was anyways going to be a complicated deal that would take many months to resolve in terms of the regulatory issues. But what do you think is likely to be the most sticky point in this deal that is causing the extension of this deadline? Is it most likely the attempt to try and do this through GDRs and thereby avoid having to do an open offer, but all the accompanying issues of GDRs, voting rights and the SAT case that's holding up their conversation or complicating it?
I think there are a number of regulatory approvals which it needs to be done. I think one is definitely the SAT case, because Bharti did go to SEBI for informal guidance and said that they need to give GDR. And I think they used a critical word, is that there will be customary agreements where the GDR holder would exercise certain voting rights. Now, if you look at the takeover code, the exception is that acquisition of GDR or ADR do not trigger a takeover offer, the 20% mandatory offer, provided the GDR and ADR not converted into underlying shares with voting rights. And therefore, if you look at the letter to Bharti, it does give the letter of Bharti to SEBI does give an impression that the GDR holder would exercise voting right, and that is probably the reason for the SAT appeal. But I think one key critical thing here before that is that they use the word customary agreement, and having dealt with Bharti in-house team, legal team for a long time, I'm confident that the rights which the GDR holder would exercise would be it will be customary in nature, and then that open offer would not trigger. But this would definitely delay because the minority interests are involved. But apart from that, I think there are a number of other regulatory approvals. The FIBB approval is required, anything beyond 49% in a telecom company, and shares are being issued to MTN shareholders and MTN for other than the cash consideration, and that again requires an FIBB approval. Press note 2, 3 and 4 has come up, which has opened up the headroom, but DOT has not changed the existing telecom license. So unless that gets changed, so I would expect, I never expected that the deal would get done so quickly. Today also I expect maybe the SAT could get sorted out, the deal structure will be out in open, the transaction document will be signed, but it will take few months before the FIBB approval is done, before the DOT is done, so the deal gets closed and we actually see the color of this real mega M&A deal.
All right, Romal, would you agree with that? And do you think, it's a question I'll put to Mohit as well later on. Do you think that they have any other option but to do this deal via the GDR structure if they want to avoid additional expense, of an open offer?
Yeah, okay. I mean, I agree with, in terms of what Mohit has said. I'm not really a GDR expert, but I would say, I think the idea is, like you mentioned, it is going to take time because a couple of things. One is on the regulatory side. Second is, I think there clearly needs to be a complete diligence being done on both sides, and I don't think so that is complete as yet. I think only when that happens and you have actually a valuation, you could go to the shareholders and ask. So there are shareholders from the MTN side as well, which needs to give its approval. So I think both of that will take some time, and it may not happen immediately.
Mohit, is there any other way they could do this deal? I know we've discussed this before, but if they could do this deal without having to do it through the GDR option, if that is fraught with uncertainty or litigation, any other way they can do this deal without triggering an open offer?
No, there's nothing else. This is the only exception. The other is the merger. And anyway, the merger is contemplated for the second leg of the transaction.
All right. So, Romal, that brings me back to, I think the point that you made about MTN shareholders having to give this deal approval. And we keep hearing noises every now and then of shareholders asking for a higher valuation or a higher price. Would you agree that since this is the last remaining or one of the last remaining large emerging market telecom plays that is up for grabs, MTN shareholders know that they're sitting on a golden goose, so to speak, and will hold out for the best available price? And therefore, that reduces Bharti's ability to negotiate a more competitive price?
It does. I mean, I think if you look at the whole of, there are really 2 or 3 markets which are really big. The Africa's, the subcontinent, which is now going to get very, very tough, and the Middle East. Middle East is very expensive. So I think the shareholders also realize on what they're sitting and the growth potential which is there in Africa, which is something like 3 years back, what was in India 3 or 4 years back. So obviously, they would want a better deal and probably a better valuation as well.
Romal, how important is this acquisition for Bharti?
I think it's very important because, 2 things. I think in terms of its global ambition, being a global player. Second is, I think if this deal doesn't go through, it sort of sets it back by a couple of years. So they would actually want to, for example, this deal to go through. Otherwise, they'll again try with someone else. But I think that will take time and just sort of postponing the inevitable. So it's very important that this goes through because a lot of energy and focus has gone of management into this deal.
All right. Let me ask you a speculative question, Mohit, because there are large tranches of equity involved here, whether it's through GDRs or otherwise, and large stakes involved in the upwards of 35% or around there. Do you think that this will still, sort of fall in the grey zone of the takeover code, and that people could still question the fact that even if you're doing it through GDRs, the fact that you're giving such large economic interest stakes, potential board seats, because who's going to want economic interest without some board seat, and that could create questions about triggering the takeover code, even if they route it through GDRs?
I actually tend to disagree there because in my view, I don't expect that the structure, the way the deal is structured right now, we are all contemplating and we're conjecturing because we don't know the blueprints of the deal. But I expect from the corporate governance perspective, I don't expect that there'll be indirect control of MTN on Bharti till the merger really happens. So I would say that obviously in any company there could be independent directors, there would be economic interest, and there could be certain rights which the depository holders will have qua the depository banks. But that does not imply that the depository bank will be obligated to follow the GDR holders' instructions. So there will be much more challenge, and even if there are 1 or 2 directors till the merger really happens, it will be more of an independent director. So I would not really get into that. It will be a gray area, but definitely it will be one of the more complicated deal in the history where such a large chunks of shares would change hand and there'll be not an open offer. But again, I would say I go back that does not only create value for MTN shareholder, but also creates great value for Bharti shareholders, and open offer is just not one way to reap the benefit for the shareholders.
Like you said, Mohit, this is a very complicated deal, a precedent-setting one, and therefore it is likely to take more time than we anticipated. Mohit, Romal, thank you very much for sharing your thoughts with us on Your World at 10. It's time for us